At Thanksgiving, my billionaire grandfather slammed his palm down on the table so hard the silverware jumped, and then he shouted my name, Grace. The sound cut straight through the room. Conversation died instantly. Laughter vanished mid-breath. Forks froze halfway to mouths. Even the soft music playing from the living room felt too loud all of a sudden. 24 people turned toward me at once, their expressions shifting from casual comfort to sharp expectation. "Explain this. Right now," he said. His voice wasn't loud anymore. That was worse. It was controlled, cold, and final, the tone he used when boardrooms fell silent and people lost everything. My fork hovered in the air. My heart slammed against my ribs. For a second, I genuinely thought he must be joking, or mistaken, or talking to someone else. I don't know what you mean," I said. The words barely came out. No one spoke. No one laughed it off. No one said, "Dad, you're confused." My grandfather didn't look angry. He looked disappointed, the kind of disappointment that comes when something has already gone wrong and everyone knows it. Before anyone could move, the front door opened. A man in a dark suit stepped inside, calm and deliberate, carrying a leather briefcase. He didn't look surprised to be there. He didn't look uncomfortable. "I'm the family lawyer," he said evenly. "And this conversation can't wait." That was the moment I knew Thanksgiving wasn't just ruined. It was about to expose something that had been hidden for years. The silence afterward was heavier than my grandfather's shout. No one rushed to defend me. No one asked the lawyer to leave. My mother's fingers tightened around her wine glass. My father stared down at the tablecloth like it held answers. My aunt's jaw clenched so hard I could see the muscle twitch. They weren't confused. They were scared. "Grandpa," I said carefully, forcing my voice steady, "I really don't know what you're talking about. I've never owned anything expensive in my life." He studied me the way he always had. Quiet, intense, as if reading between every word. "Grace," he said slowly, 3 years ago, I purchased a property. I put it in your name." The room tilted. "That's impossible," I said. "I was living with roommates. I couldn't even afford my car repairs." "I know," he replied. That single sentence sent a chill through me. If he knew how broke I was, how could this be true? I turned to my parents. "Mom? Dad? Please tell me what he's talking about." My mother smiled softly, the smile she used when she wanted me to calm down and stop asking questions. "Sweetheart," she said, "this really isn't the right time." That word again. Overwhelmed. The same word she used when my credit applications were rejected. The same one she used when job offers disappeared. The same one she used every time I pushed too hard. "I'm not overwhelmed," I said. "I'm confused." "It's Thanksgiving," my father said quickly. "We can talk about finances another day." "Finances?" my grandfather repeated quietly. He leaned forward, his gaze locked on my parents. "You told me Grace wasn't emotionally stable enough to manage large assets." The air left my lungs. "You said what?" I whispered. My mother sighed, as if I were being unreasonable. "We were worried about you. You've always been sensitive." Sensitive. I thought about the nights I cried alone, convinced something was wrong with me, that I just wasn't built like the rest of them. "What exactly did you tell him?" I asked. My aunt leaned in. "Grace, you're taking this too personally." That's when I understood. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was something everyone knew except me. "Why am I hearing about a property in my name for the first time in my life?" I asked. No one answered. That pause was louder than any argument. My father finally spoke. "You've always had trouble handling stress. You remember after college? I remembered working double shifts and pretending everything was fine. If Grandpa bought something for me," I said, "why wasn't I told?" "Because you weren't ready," my aunt said. "Ready for what?" I asked. "The truth." My cousin laughed nervously. "You're twisting this." Then why did my life feel like it had been edited without my consent? My grandfather hadn't said a word. He just watched. That scared me most of all. My mother reached for my hand. I pulled away. "We were afraid money would ruin you," she said. "Ruin me? What exactly did you handle?" I asked. "We made decisions in your best interest. So while I was struggling, they were deciding my future without me." "Did you ever receive my letters?" my grandfather asked suddenly. "Letters?" "I wrote every month." "I never got any," I said. My mother's face drained of color. Then my grandfather said calmly, "Then someone has been lying. No one denied it. The lawyer still hadn't spoken. His briefcase sat unopened on the table. Heavy. Waiting. And I realized this wasn't about one property. This was about control. And we still hadn't opened the briefcase. The lawyer hadn't moved since my grandfather accused someone of lying. He stood near the doorway, patient, composed, as if he had already seen this moment play out in his mind and was simply waiting for everyone else to catch up. The briefcase at his feet looked ordinary, but somehow it felt heavier than the table itself, like it carried the weight of years no one wanted uncovered. My grandfather finally turned toward him. "Ethan," he said, his voice steady but tired. "Please." That was all it took. Ethan stepped forward and placed the briefcase directly on the dining table, between the half-carved turkey and the untouched cranberry sauce. The small click of the locks echoed through the room, sharp and final, like the sound of a door closing behind us. "I'll keep this simple," Ethan said, "because what's inside is not—" He opened the case and removed a thick stack of documents, arranged with a precision that felt deliberate, almost surgical. Color-coded tabs, labels, dates. This wasn't a discussion. It was an investigation. 3 years ago, Ethan began. Mr. Richard Collins purchased a lakeside property valued just under $3 million. My breath caught. That property, he continued, was purchased in the name of Grace Collins. Every muscle in my body went rigid. "That's impossible," my father said immediately. "Grace would remember signing something like that." Ethan nodded. "You're absolutely right." He slid a document toward me. "Miss Collins," he said calmly, "does this signature belong to you?" My hands trembled as I leaned forward. It was my name, written clearly, but it wasn't mine. The slant was wrong. The pressure was wrong. It looked like someone copying something they'd practiced too many times. "No," I said quietly, "I've never signed this." My mother laughed softly, the sound thin and brittle. "This is ridiculous. Grace forgets things all the time." I looked up at her. "You taught me how to sign my name," I said. "You know that isn't mine." The table went silent. Ethan didn't react. He simply turned another page. "6 months ago," he said. "Oh." Ownership of this property was transferred to another family member for the amount of $1. $1. My aunt shifted in her chair, the legs scraping loudly against the floor. "That transfer," Ethan continued, "was filed using documentation printed less than a year ago." My grandfather's eyes narrowed. "Explain." "Most modern printers embed identification codes," Ethan said evenly. "They record date and time. This document was created 6 months ago." My father stood abruptly. "This is insane. You're accusing us of crimes over paperwork errors." "Sit down," my grandfather said quietly. My father sat. Ethan flipped another page. Funds intended to support Grace's early loan payments were redirected. "Redirected where?" I asked, my voice unsteady. "To a private account," Ethan replied. "Under a family member's name." My mother's hand flew to her mouth. "That's not what it looks like. We were managing things temporarily." "Temporarily?" I asked. "For 3 years?" My voice cracked, and suddenly I remembered all the nights I lay awake calculating bills, wondering why everyone else seemed to move forward while I stayed stuck. "You told me to be patient," I said. "You told me struggling would make me stronger. No one met my eyes." Ethan closed the folder slightly and looked at my grandfather. "This is no longer a family matter," he said. "It's a legal one." My grandfather nodded slowly. And in that moment I realized something painful and clear. They hadn't underestimated me. They had deliberately kept me powerless. For a long moment, no one spoke. The documents lay there like witnesses that didn't need to speak because the truth was already written. "So that's why," I said quietly. Everyone looked at me. "That's why every apartment application failed. Why my credit score kept dropping. Why I could never get ahead." "Grace, you're jumping to conclusions," my mother said. "Am I?" I turned to Ethan. "Were there other irregularities?" He hesitated just long enough to tell me the answer wouldn't be easy. "Yes." "From who?" I asked. "From this household," he said. "Emails to financial institutions and employers expressing concern about your emotional stability?" The room erupted. "That's a lie," my father shouted. I laughed, sharp and hollow. "You already sabotaged me," I said. "You just called it protection." My aunt stood. "This has gone too far. Grace has always been dramatic." I looked at her. Did you know I cried in my car after every rejection letter? She didn't answer. My grandfather closed his eyes. You told me Grace was unstable, he said quietly. We were afraid, my mother whispered. Afraid of what? I asked. She looked at me carefully. That if you became independent, you wouldn't need us. The truth snapped into place. It wasn't about safety. It was about leverage. So you kept me small, I said. My father slammed his hand on the table. We're still your parents, and parents don't build. Cages, I replied. Ethan spoke again. There's one more thing. My stomach dropped. What? The property wasn't vacant, he said. Who's living there? Ethan glanced at my aunt. A relative by marriage. So while I struggled, someone else lived in what was mine. My grandfather stood. This ends tonight. Apologies erupted, excuses, promises. But I wasn't listening. Something inside me had shifted. I wasn't afraid anymore. I turned to my grandfather. I want the truth, I said. Out in the open. He nodded. That ends tonight. And I knew whatever came next would change everything. The room didn't explode after that. It collapsed. Not with shouting or chaos, but with a heavy, suffocating silence that pressed against my ears and made it hard to breathe. The kind of silence that comes when there's nothing left to deny and nowhere left to hide. The documents lay open on the table, edges curling slightly under the warm dining room lights, as if even the paper was tired of pretending. Ethan straightened the stack carefully. From this point forward, he said, his voice calm and unwavering, everything will proceed through legal channels. My father swallowed hard. You don't need to do this, he said quietly. We can fix it. Quietly, the same word that had buried the truth for years. No, Ethan replied. That option no longer exists. He turned toward my grandfather. If you approve, we'll file for immediate asset recovery and initiate a full financ. EL audit. Do it, my grandfather said without hesitation. My mother reached for him, desperation breaking through her carefully practiced composure. Richard, please. We're family. He looked at her for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice wasn't angry. It was empty. Family doesn't behave this way, he said. Family doesn't build a cage and call it protection. Something inside me loosened. Not because it hurt less, but because it finally made sense. The property will be returned to Grace's name effective immediately, Ethan continued. Any income derived from its use will be calculated and repaid. Additional damages will be assessed. My aunt shook her head, her voice sharp with disbelief. You're destroying this family. No, I said softly. You already did. This is just the part where everyone sees it. For the first time that night, no one argued with me. My father sank back into his chair, shoulders sagging. My mother covered her face with her hands. Whatever roles they had been playing, guardians, decision-makers, protectors, fell apart right there at the table. They were just people facing consequences. Ethan closed his briefcase. Investigators will follow up within 48 hours, he said. Until then, I strongly advise everyone to refrain from contacting Grace. He looked at me directly. You're safe now. Safe? The word felt unfamiliar, but it settled somewhere deep in my chest. My grandfather stepped beside me and placed a steady hand on my shoulder. I'm sorry, he said, not just to me, but to the version of me that had been struggling in silence for years. You won't have to fight alone anymore. I nodded, finally allowing myself to breathe. Around us, the Thanksgiving table sat abandoned. Cold food, spilled wine, broken traditions. But I didn't feel like I was losing anything. I felt like I was getting my life back. A year has passed since that night. Sometimes it feels distant, like a story I once heard about someone else. Other times it's close enough that I can still hear my grandfather's voice cutting through the room. Still feel that moment when everything cracked open. I'm standing on the deck of the lakeside house now. The water stretches out in front of me, calm and indifferent, as if it never witnessed the lies built around it. The house doesn't feel like evidence anymore. It feels like space, like breath. The legal process was long, interviews where I had to repeat things I'd spent years trying not to remember, bank statements that showed how carefully my life had been controlled, emails that proved my instincts hadn't been paranoia, they'd been warnings. Some days I left meetings feeling empowered. Other days I sat in my car afterward, hands gripping the steering wheel, wondering how people who claimed to love me could have been so deliberate in keeping me small. But I kept going because for the first time no one was telling me to stop asking questions. The property was returned. Within months. Every document came with an explanation. Every decision required my approval. No one spoke for me anymore. The stolen funds were restored, along with compensation. I paid off my student loans. When the balance hit zero, I didn't celebrate. I just stared at the screen, realizing how much fear had shaped my choices for so long. I worked with therapists and financial advisors, not because I was unstable, but because healing deserves structure too. I started sharing my experience online, anonymously at first. People responded. Messages poured in from strangers who had been told they were too emotional, too irresponsible, not ready. People who had learned to doubt themselves the same way I had. So I made it official. Now I help people understand contracts, finances, and boundaries. I teach them how to recognize when concern turns into control. The work fills my calendar faster than I ever imagined. More importantly, it fills something inside me that used to feel permanently empty. My grandfather visits often. We're rebuilding carefully. One evening, watching the sun disappear behind the lake, he said something that finally let me forgive myself. "You weren't weak," he said. "You were isolated. There's a difference." I think about that often. This house feels quiet now. Safe. Mine. Thanksgiving doesn't feel the same anymore. For years, it was a performance. Smiles, silence, and secrets dressed up as love. I thought that was normal. I was wrong. Silence can be a cage. Love doesn't require you to shrink. And protection never comes with fear or secrecy. If there's one thing my story taught me, it's this. You are allowed to know the truth about your own life. You're allowed to ask questions. And when the truth comes out, healing can finally begin. For the first time, I'm not surviving. I'm planning, and that might be the greatest freedom of all.